Welcome to The Friday Habit with Mark Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learned to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday. And welcome to The Friday Habit. Ben, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. I am making a last minute trip out to Costa Rica tonight, so get my bags packed and just excited to get going.
Okay, I love Costa Rica, one of my top favorite places. Well, hey, I'm excited for our show today because we have an author on who I'm a big fan of, who's got a series coming out on Apple soon, and has a lot of knowledge, I guess you could say, about a lot of different things. So I'm excited to talk to him about his journeys and artificial intelligence and a bunch of other things. So today we have Hugh Howey on the podcast, and he is the New York Times bestselling author of over 20 novels. His book Wool is now a TV show called Silo on Apple TV Plus, and his Beacon 23 novel comes out later this year on AMC. His books have been translated in over 40 languages and have sold millions of copies around the world. So, Hugh, welcome to the Friday Habit.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we're super excited.
Now, in your bio, we talk about your books and all the great things that you've written and all the success you've had there. But I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit of your journey and your story with our audience about even how you got to becoming an author and kind of what you were doing with your life before you started writing novels and stuff like that. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit of that. I mean, did you grow up always thinking that you'd be an author or that you wanted to be a writer, or how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I've been dreaming of it since I was 12 or 13 years old. I started as an avid reader. I was one of those kids that walked down this street with a book open, bumping into trash cans and light posts, read under my desk at school. I was just a complete bookworm and nerd. And I read a couple of books when I was like 12, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Ender's Game, that made me want to be a science fiction writer. But I had no idea what to do. I spent 20 years trying to write a book and never could finish it. So by the time I hit my 30s, I don't know if this is common or not, but I felt like all my productive years are behind me, which was so silly in retrospect. But I felt like an impatience and a frustration with I didn't feel like I was where I was supposed to be in life, And I was like 32 years old when I sat down to write what would become my first novel. And it's funny, looking back now, I realize how young I was and how much creative time I had ahead of me. But at the time, I felt like I was washed up. So goes to show what I know. But once I wrote my first book, I was just hooked on it.
Wow.
I was like, I'm going to write 2 or 3 books a year for 10 years and just see if I can, make a career out of this.
What helped you get over the hump that time? You said you had tried before. What helped you kind of get over that and get that first one done?
I think a lot of things have to build up. It's like a synapse firing in your brain. It's not like you get one input and then it fires off. The neuron has to get maybe 15 triggers and then it fires. But the one that really the straw that broke the camel's back was I was at a book conference just covering it as a book reviewer and critic, and this author was giving a talk on a panel, and someone in the audience said, "Hey, I've been trying to write a book and I'm not having much success," or basically talking like me, but it was someone else. And this author just slapped the table and stood up really angry and said, "You stop talking about writing, and you stop telling people you're going to write, and you stop asking other people questions about writing, and you just sit down and you write." And my hair was blown back. I felt like she was yelling at me. She wasn't even looking at me, but I was like, she sees my psyche. And I went home from that, and a few things kind of culminated. I was meeting more authors and realizing that they were just regular people who didn't get in their own way. And I was getting in my way for many years. And that was the book that I just sat down and started writing. I didn't care if it was good or not. I just was not going to let myself, stop myself. There's no one who could stop me but me, and I've been doing that for years.
Hmm.
What were you doing before 32?
My first career, I kind of stumbled into it. I was living on a sailboat in college, and I dropped out of school and sailed down to the Bahamas and just sailed around for about a year, and just like a vagabond. And I started doing odd jobs on people's boats in exchange for food or a little bit of spending money. And the
Hmm.
jobs got more involved and the boats got bigger. And by the time I was like 24, 25, I was driving 150, 160-foot mega yachts all over the world. And it paid well, but you couldn't really have a relationship. It was very much
Hmm.
it wasn't what I dreamt of doing. It was just kind of something I was good at. And it was during a lot of these boat deliveries and boat trips where I would have hours at the helm, just staring at the horizon. And I was daydreaming about like, yeah, the books I was eventually going to write. And when I got out of
Hmm.
yachting, and I was like, inland with an ex girlfriend, that's when I finally took the time and started getting these novels written.
Wow. So when you first sat down to write, like, did you have a certain formula that you followed, or did you get some sort of book at the library? It's like how to write a book. Like, what was your process to even start like banging something out that eventually turned into your first novel?
The best the best way to learn to write is to read. It's like playing music. You just have to listen to a lot of
Hmm.
tunes, and you absorb rules that aren't written down anywhere. They're just shared knowledge that's been passed down through lots of other artists. And when you read books, it's the same. If you talk to a lot of
Hmm.
best-selling authors, they don't know why what they do works, like how to get someone to love a protagonist, like in a paragraph. But they've absorbed so much good story that they just figure, they regurgitate it.
Hmm.
And I think of reading as
Hmm.
like listening to a tuning fork for a writer. You kind of get what the pitch correct before you start, with your own voice. And at the time that I wrote my
Hmm.
first book, I was reading and reviewing a novel every day for a website. So every morning I would sit
Wow.
and I would spend 8 to 10 hours reading an entire book, and then I would write a review, and the next day I would do it again. And I was doing that for a few months and going through,
Wow.
hundreds of books, and it just put me like I was so full of story that when I went to write, it just poured out of me like so easily.
Wow. I love that. I love that. And I think that is such a great um reminder to everyone, right? To like it starts with you just doing, and that's why I tell a lot of young guys who are coming up who are like, how do I get started? I say, start just taking photos, start just making videos, like spend time just doing those things, because at some point you'll have the right opportunity, and then your skill set will be ready to take on that opportunity, which will then beget more work and more opportunity. But really it's about just doing it. I mean, that's what I kind of hear from you. Like you're saying, like, I really was just reading a novel a day and writing about it and absorbing all these, voices and ways to explain things, that then when I came down to do it myself, it just kind of poured out of me. And so, a lot of times people think that, oh, wow, you were just this guy who just was so gifted and talented, and you just woke up one day and wrote Wool. But it's like, well, no, it was the hours and hours and hours that you spent before then, where you were absorbing all these things that subconsciously were just making you a better writer.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's been. I think we've dispelled the myth of the prodigy. Like whenever we find someone who's like 10 and they wrote their first
Mm-hmm.
opera, then we find out that they got obsessed with operas when they were like 5 and spent 5 years just like listening to opera. And
Right.
and so there's always this feeling of like overnight success that has a different story behind it. And another thing that helped me writing those reviews every day
Mm.
got me in the habit of writing daily. And before I was trying to write novels I would get a little inspired and I would write a little bit, and then like a week later I'd write a little bit more. and you cannot finish a novel that way. Like you have to do it daily, and that really unlocked. That was the
Mm,
big secret for me. Like if you apply something with consistency like that, it accrues really quickly.
yeah, that's so awesome. So what did you learn about yourself though? Like how are you making money during this time? Were you a barista at a coffee shop? I mean, what were you doing? Were you getting paid for the articles that you were writing, or like how are you making a living? Like, what kind of life is that? You know, as an author, like when you're first starting out, what kind of sacrifices are you making, and like how are you making ends meet in order to kind of pursue that? Because it seems like it's a very time consuming thing to sit down and like write all day.
Very time consuming. The I think the key, we have this kind of archetype of the starving artist, and there's some truth to it. Like, it doesn't have to be starving in a caloric way, but there are things you have to go without. And it really helped that I was averse to debt, so I lived a very simple life. I lived 5 years on a sailboat that cost me
Yeah.
$10,000. People pay more for a car, and I lived out at anchor a lot, so
Yes.
I had no living expenses. When I was writing, I had saved up money
Mm.
in the yachting industry. I lived in a 750 square foot house that I paid cash for. Tiny. You can't imagine how small this home was. Like the bedroom was basically a bed inside. That was all there was room for. I had no debt.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I didn't do like my entertainment was to walk my dog. We went on hikes. I every
Mm.
morning
Hmm.
I would put on a crock pot with like cheap, veggies and whatever the cheapest cut of meat was, and it tasted amazing. It's amazing what a can of cream of mushroom soup and some dried onions will do to
Yeah.
in a crock pot all day. Um, and so I wasn't unhappy. I was
Hmm.
living a
Yeah.
great life, but my friends would go out to concerts and fly overseas, and I just was concentrating on living a simple life and putting all my energy into my craft. Once I'd written my first book, and I did a book signing at a bookstore, um, I talked to the manager, and they were looking for someone to work part time, just 30 hours a week, $10 an hour. Like while I was writing Wool, I was making $300 a week before taxes were taken out, and that was more than I needed to pay my bills. So being willing to make that
Mm.
sacrifice gave me a huge advantage over other people. Like I was able to write 2 or 3 books a year, which is a
Mhm.
Hmm.
huge leg up on someone who's writing one book every 5 years. What I've noticed when
Right.
the people who have this kind of success, most of them are making sacrifices like that, and it really separates you from people who aren't willing to. And that's a question you have to ask yourself if you're trying to
Mm.
make it in any kind of industry that requires a grind. Are you out hustling 9 out of 10 people around you? And if you are, think good things are going to happen.
Mm.
Just eventually.
How many years were you doing that? Was Wool your first kind of big success, or were some of the other books also starting to fund you slowly over time? How did that work as far as starting to make money on the book side of things?
Wool is definitely like completely outsized from everything before. It was my seventh published work. I had five novels and another novelette before that, and things were starting to build. I never thought I would make any money writing. I went into it with very low expectations. I had the dream, but I didn't have any expectations of it. So I had to
Hmm.
do it because I loved it. And I told myself that's the only way that I would make it
Hmm.
through lean years and disappointing years. Do it because you love it. Um, don't do it because
Hmm.
you're expecting anything immediately, because it won't happen immediately, and then you'll get frustrated and you'll quit. But I was getting to where I was making like a couple $100 a month just on sales from these other books. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but my living expenses were so low that this was like, all my utilities.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but then Wool hit and things changed. Like within a month, Wool was out out earning everything else I had written, and it was only a 99-cent short story. So I was only making 35 cents a sale. But in the
Hmm.
first month, I sold 1,000 copies. And in the next month, I sold 10,000 copies. And it just kept going up. And so it got to where I was making, once I had like the 5 parts of Wool published, I was making 6 figures a month, just, from book sales on Amazon. And I never thought it would continue. I thought, okay, 1 month of this, sock this away for a rainy day fund, but like, don't expect it to ever happen again. And it kept happening for
Right.
like 3 years, and it was the reason it was happening because I kept thinking, okay, this isn't going to continue. So go at this as hard as you can. And eventually I realized the reason it's continuing is because you're going at it so hard. At some point, you got to ease up on yourself.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right.
What so you said you wrote Wool as a short story first. And then at what point did you just say like, "Oh, I need to like turn this into a novel?" And then was that hard? Like it's almost like had you kind of put it to bed and then it was like, "Okay, now I got to like think of 1,000 more pages to write, to fill out this story to make it a novel." Like how did you like go through that process?
That's exactly what happened. I wrote a story where it's, I can spoil it because it's only 50 pages long before you figure this out, but all the main characters are dead. And I wrote that, published it, I didn't promote it. I just set it aside and went back to my novels. But the reviews, at first I saw the sales. It just like my monthly income shot up and I had to go look at my report to see what was happening. And this short story was selling like gangbusters. And so I went and looked at the reviews. And back then I knew how many reviews I had on everything just at a glance because they come in so slowly. And this had hundreds of reviews really quickly.
Right.
And the only complaint people had, the main thing people were asking for was more. They were like, this was amazing, but it was short. Where's the rest of this? And I had no more. That was it. So I had to do exactly what you said. I had to sit down and imagine the next 1,000 pages of this story. And because it was successful as a short story, I thought, okay, don't mess up what's working. Write another short story that continues this
Right.
and treat it like comic books or like TV
Hmm.
episodes. Tell an entertaining small story that builds the bigger story. And once I started writing,
Hmm.
like once I had 3 of these out, I was like, okay, it'll take 5 of these to tell the whole story. And that became the plan. And once the 5th
Hmm.
one was published, that was that was it. I was going to have 5 short stories called Wool, part 1 through 5. And one day someone emailed me and said, hey, I don't want to click on 5 links. Can you combine these into a single PDF or something? And I was like, fine. Just for that one person, I was like,
Right.
fine. I'll make your life easier. It took me like half a day to combine the books, put a new cover art on it, upload it in a new product. And that became what's called the Wool Omnibus. And next thing I knew, everyone else had
Yes.
the same idea this guy had. Instead of buying the 5 books individually, they just started buying. As a matter of fact, the reviews on the 5 books were like, don't bother buying this. Go buy the novel instead. Like, once you read this one, you're going to want the other one. Save yourself the money.
Hmm.
Go buy the omnibus. So even the reviews on the
Hmm.
best-selling short stories were saying, go buy the novel. Next thing I know, that novel was selling so many copies, the New York Times had to list it on their bestseller list. And that changes everything. It was a
Hmm.
Wow.
self-published, the publisher was like my name. And then I had agents
Right.
contacting me. I had film deals coming at me. It just changed everything once that hit the list.
Mm.
Hmm. That's so interesting to hear that backstory because Mark and I were actually talking before we started recording, and I was talking about how I found the structure of the book really cool because how you have these characters and then you meet these new characters, but then the other characters, as you said, are gone, and just like keeps this like chain of these characters. And I was like, I've never read a book quite like that before, but it really worked, And I was like, that's funny to hear how it came together that way. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, I don't think I could have published it through a traditional publisher. When I took it to um, publishers, and they were making like incredible offers, but they were also like, "We're not sure about this, how you started, and we don't know if you can get away with this." And meanwhile, it's outselling all of their books. And so it's not like I'm a genius. It was
Right.
accidental.
Right.
I stumbled onto this. But it is funny how like dealing with people who are very I would say creatively conservative. They don't want to they want to kind of recreate what's already
Hmm.
worked. They had a really hard time understanding why this was any kind of success.
That's such a common. I feel like that's such a common thing. When someone does something great or different, it's kind of like, oh well, everyone who was the expert said that that wouldn't work or that wasn't a good idea. And then it's like it worked. When you first wrote the short story, did you think like, oh, this is gold, like this is the best thing I've written? Like, what was your thought process after you had written that? Did you think this is gonna be number one bestseller, or were you like, okay, that was fun, I'm glad I got those thoughts out of my head and like kind of move on to the next thing?
It was more the latter. It was all of the little short story I wrote. It was going to be an entire novel, but I was working on other books. People wanted sequels to these other stories, but this story was haunting me. The story that became Wool, and so my idea was just to get it out as a short story, so I wasn't taking up headspace, and get back to the novels. When I wrote
Hmm.
it, to me, it was my favorite thing that I'd written so far. It was deeply emotional. I loved the
That's
mystery and the
cool.
way you
Hmm.
couldn't really understand. No matter what you thought was happening, you would second guess yourself, just like a good mystery novel. Um, but I didn't think it was
Hmm.
commercial at all. Like I didn't promote it. I charged 99 cents for it and forgot about it. So it's wild how the things
Right.
you're most passionate about are probably the things that have the most commercial potential, and the opposite is not true. The things you think, if you're just chasing a trend or doing something because you think it has market value, you're probably going to get beat out by someone who happens to be doing something similar, but they're doing it because it's their passion.
Hmm. I love that. That is just a great reminder, because we all find meaning in doing something that we're passionate about, but sometimes we sacrifice what we're passionate about so that we can make a buck or do something we think will make a buck, you know. And you hear it time and time again. It's just like, pursue your dreams, or be, like, follow your passion. And it's just sometimes it's just scary. So it's encouraging to hear that, from someone who said, yeah, just you got to do it. You got to put the work in and then just follow your passion. It's a good
The other
formula for
advantage is
success.
if you're doing something you love, you can't lose.
Mm-hmm.
Writing is a hobby. My sister loves to knit. My mom likes to paint. My I love to garden. Um, but people who have those hobbies rarely think like, I'm gonna end up, making a lot of money and being famous for this. They're just hobbies that people enjoy doing. Um, and the unusual thing about like
Mm.
writing, playing an instrument, making a movie is because it's so commercial and there are people out there making a lot of money doing it. It's hard to do those hobbies without having the dream as well. And I think the only healthy way to
Mm-hmm.
pursue these kinds of creative fields is to make sure you don't lose the hobby side of it. Make sure you're doing it because you love it, that you would choose to do it even if it costs you money. And to me, that
Mm.
was the attitude I brought into it. I think it's healthier than, okay, this is something that's a hobby, but I'm not going to be happy until someone pays me for it. Like that is self-defeating, I think, to have that attitude.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really, I feel like that's really helpful because it even makes me think about that idea of like when you have this peak experience of hitting a goal or hitting what your goal is, and then, oh wow, that was really successful, and then it's not that pressure on yourself like, now what, how do I beat that success? Seems like with your mindset and approach, you don't, it probably, I mean, I'd be curious to see how you feel about that after having that success. Did you have more pressure on yourself? But it seems like if your attitude is, well, hey, that's awesome that happened. It was a side effect of me doing what I love. Let me keep doing what I love. And that's the real purpose, is that creative process and getting these ideas out there more than the money. And yeah, has that mindset helped you with that kind of effect of like, wow, that was successful, and now there's pressure to do it again?
Yeah, two things. Um, One of the things I did deliberately was I kept subverting expectations. So whatever I had done that was very successful, like with Wool, when I wrote Shift, it was a very different kind of story. I did not want to get trapped into repeating myself or being in a rut. And I wrote
Hmm.
a love story, and I wrote a really gruesome zombie book and young adult space opera, and I just didn't want to repeat myself. And because for me, the passion of like
Hmm.
writing that first book was I was creating something brand new, just a new world, and getting trapped writing, sequels or the same kind of story would have been uh, disastrous for my passion. Um, but you asked if things got more difficult.
Mm.
The thing that got hard for me was when I was writing for myself, I wrote really loose and free, and I took a lot of
Hmm.
risks, and I was super creative. And uh,
Hmm.
later, when I had a million people like reading my books, I could almost feel like the eyeballs over my shoulder, and it was really my
Hmm.
inner critic was kind of
Interesting.
my inner critic was now on steroids. Like it was amplifying all the imagined voices of the people who were expecting to read this. So once that started happening, and it was a very brief, I only dealt with this for a very short period of time. Because once I realized that was happening, I was like, forget that. No, you don't even know if you're going to publish this. No one's going to read this. It's just for you. And once after like 2 or 3 months of hating everything I was writing, I learned to hate it a normal
Hmm.
amount, which every author should, hate their writing somewhat. But I got back to
Yes.
just writing like
Hate it
Hmm.
for
less.
myself. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Who are some authors that really like science fiction? I'm a huge fan of Isaac Asimov, and he like listening to machine learning and all your little short stories just reminds me of like a lot of Isaac Asimov's short stories, like I, Robot and Bicentennial Man, and like all those short stories that became decent movies later on. But who are some authors that you were into? I know you mentioned Ender's Game, which is like one of my favorite books. My wife and I read that. We listened to it on an audiobook driving through Texas, and it's like every time I think about that book, I remember that road trip that we like listened to it together on, and then I let my kids listen to it, and I was thinking like, this is actually pretty brutal, like the
It's
story of
gruesome.
these kids,
Yeah.
and it's really intense. I'm like, yeah, totally. I was like, maybe I shouldn't let my kids listen to this just yet.
Um, I love Peter F. Hamilton. He writes these huge, sweeping space operas that are just some of the most inventive storytelling out there. Impossible to adapt, probably, but his um, Neutronium Alchemist series is incredible. I've always loved Philip K. Dick. He just makes you question reality and knows how to write a
Hmm.
really tight, punchy short story. Um, I grew up on the classics. I love the dystopian stuff, like or
Hmm.
1984, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, Handmaid's Tale, like
Yeah.
um, anything that Animal Farm, Gulliver's Travels, like all these things that were subversive and worked on multiple layers. Um, but once I started writing science fiction, I learned I had to start reading more nonfiction and learning like what's the
Mm.
frontiers of knowledge. Um, Reading a lot of psychology and philosophy, a lot of history, like how are we repeating these themes, mostly to avoid um, stumbling upon a story in a way that I would want to explore it. Because if I knew it was already done, I would never try it myself. So I
Mm.
started kind of avoiding my own genre in
Right.
order to have more creative freedom.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And then you're bringing that up. Right now we're in this heightened sense of artificial intelligence and AI and Chat GPT, and we're seeing all this stuff. Where my feed on YouTube is just constantly bombarded with the end of society as we know it, and Elon Musk saying it's like the scariest thing he could imagine. What are your thoughts about the whole artificial intelligence, and you being a science fiction writer and can dream and imagine the worst case scenarios, when it comes to technology and how it can overtake us. What are your personal opinions and thoughts about where you see things and where you see things going?
I think it's I think it wouldn't take AI to create big problems. Like all it takes is more technology and one bad individual. Like I don't think it's we're gonna have to get to sentience. If we have people able to do CRISPR at home, DNA sequencing at home, and
Mm,
people on message boards sharing code for human viruses rather than computer viruses, we're going to get to a really weird territory. Um,
mm,
the thought experiment that I give people is, and I'm not sure I've even came up with this because it's been so long since I've been using it, and it sounds like something someone else probably said at some point. But the experiment is this: some morning, everyone wakes up and they have a necklace uh, around their neck, and there's a button on the necklace, and the button says, "If you push this, everyone on Earth will die." And the question is, how long do we live? Everyone is aware of the button at the exact same time.
mm.
How long does humanity have? And I think the only sane answer is like half a second, maybe, or 2/10 of a second. But I wouldn't give us a full second, um, because there's someone out there who will push that button, and there's someone who will push it because they can't not push buttons, or the idea of going with everyone else, or someone pushing it after them or ahead of them. Like there's a million reasons to push that button, and all it takes is one. And so the question
Mm.
for humanity, if everyone agrees that that's true, and I've never met anyone who's never once has someone said we'll last an hour, much less we'll all put the button down and never touch it. That's just inconceivable, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so then the question is, if we all agree that's the answer, the next question is, what technology would equal that button? And if that is an inevitable technology, then we will go extinct. Um, and it's difficult to come up with that technology. So that the next question is much trickier because nuclear
Mm.
weapons are not powerful enough to wipe out humankind. Global warming is not powerful enough to wipe out
Right.
humankind. Right now, the only thing we can think of is a really large meteor, which might not be enough, or the sun going nova, which is 5 billion years away.
Mm.
But with
Right.
CRISPR and home printing technology, with nanotechnology, with um, you know, maybe there's a world-ending system out there, and AI, if it's not it, could point the way towards one and help someone develop it. So, is this apocalyptic? I
Mm.
think maybe yes, but not in the ways that Elon Musk, who knows almost nothing about artificial intelligence, thinks it is. It's going to be in a way that we
Mm.
can't yet conceive of. It's going to help us get to a different path.
Right.
I think AI has much greater chance of helping us solve big problems, um, clean energy, climate change, solving diseases, um, even curing,
Lifting
treating
people out of
death as a disease.
poverty.
Yeah, alleviating in poverty.
Mm.
It's gonna open up doors for so many people. Like it's a great leveler. Like you used to have to learn to code to create the app that you wanted, and now once you
Mm-hmm.
can just describe your app to a machine, and the machine will make the app for you, then people all over the world who have great ideas but don't have access to education are going to become entrepreneurs, and we should celebrate that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That seems like a dark positive answer, if that's a thing. It's like dark comedy, dark positivity.
Well, like here's something else. Like we're all scared of like humans all dying, but that's the one thing that we know that humans will all do. Like, you know, there's like 9 billion people on the planet. All 9 billion of them are going to die, in less than 120 years. All 9 billion are going to die. And we can know that, and it doesn't freak us out. But when we think about them all dying at the same time, it triggers something. So what we are really concerned about is humanity surviving. We're not really concerned about individuals. And once we accept that, then we need to start thinking about, how does humanity survive? It's not through individuals. It's going to be through our collective knowledge and our collective creativity. It's going to be, the strands of DNA as just markers of what we were. And AI is the solution for immortality in that case, and not the harbinger of our destruction. There is no future in which this earth is habitable for an infinite number of years. That's just not how physics works. The sun will run out of energy. It will swell until it touches the earth. Forget about being here forever, and forget about living on Mars, and forget about humans traveling to distant stars. It's inconceivable that we solve those problems, but it's not inconceivable that we create so many copies of a machine that houses our collective consciousness, and we just shoot them in every direction, and they're solar powered, and they're, I don't see the end of humanity with, I don't see humanity ending with technology. I see it really beginning with technology. Is that less dark?
Where do you think there's that line?
I love it. It's super interesting. Working on a new novel? No, just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Where do you think that line is, though? Because at what point are we not human, right? Like with the idea of the singularity, right? Where everything kind of comes together and we are able to live forever. We're able to, put neural links in our brain and be connected to the internet. We're able to replace our body parts and become robots. Like, I guess at some point the question is going to be, and Ben and I recently watched Ex Machina, and we were talking about that idea of, like, there's this robot, right, who has a directive to survive, and they figure out, okay, what do I have to do? Who do I have to manipulate in order to survive? And then at what point is that not a being, or I don't even know how to articulate this idea or thought, but it's like, at some point will humanity cease to exist, or it'll exist in a new way?
Or merge with technology in a way.
And merge with technology, and then it's like, are we human then at that point?
Yeah,
I don't know.
We're at that point already. We were at that point 10 years ago or so. The combination of Google and the internet and Wikipedia has made, any furtherance of our existence bonus time, because we've set it down. And if we all just keeled over right now, and an alien race or the next thing to pop up through the soup that is the warm earth stumbled upon that, like, there we are. We're still alive. Our contributions to culture and art and science and our philosophy, and it's all right there. And now that answer is 100%. It's done. Like, the fact that you just have to give ChatGPT access to the internet, and you can ask it anything. It could have this conversation that the three of us are having. It could emulate the three of us having that conversation. And this is the worst version of this AI you will ever see. Every year, every week, you're seeing the dumbest AI there will ever be. So when you hear people saying, what AI can't do, they're probably already wrong before they finish the sentence. Like, it's getting smarter so fast. So, another hypothetical, if we all disappeared, and what someone had was access to ChatGPT 4 and the internet right now, how much of humanity would really be lost? Like, not much. It could recite every sonnet of Shakespeare. It could write an infinite number of new sonnets of Shakespeare. If it did an infinite number of them, then an infinite number of those would be better than any sonnet of Shakespeare. That's just math. And humanity would continue to exist, and I think we need to think more about that and our collective transcendence and existence, and stop focusing so much on the little monkey brain fear that we all have of dying individually, which is a guarantee. Like, let's just get over that part, because that's just going to happen. And let's stop being sad about it too. It's the beauty of life that it ends, you know?
So it's almost like you're talking about not necessarily the biological continuation of humanity even, but almost like what legacy do we live, or contribution in the universe, almost like what are we contributing to that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're contributing a lot just by broadcasting things into the ether that could be picked up someday. I think really getting hung up, like, to me, is Shakespeare dead? I don't think so. Like, we have a conversation with him and about him all the time. We people continue to reinterpret his works and to put them on, and all of us dream of having any kind of extended life, the way you know, so many of the great artists have had that are now gone. I think the people worrying about my content is being stolen to train AI, man, please let me be some part of that. Like, I think we should just celebrate that our blog posts and our social media feeds and everything is, we're going to live on forever as some small part of this prismatic whole.
Yeah. You know, I'd love to get a little personal if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
I'd love to hear, and if you're not okay, just say no. Next question. But I'd love to hear a little bit. You've made a lot of sacrifices in your life. You know, hearing about the adventures, that you went on, tours around the world and yachts, and you were a vagabond, and you did all these things for yourself, and you pursued writing. Do you have any regrets, or like, do you look back and say, oh, maybe I wish I would have invested more into that relationship, or, put more time? Do you have kids? Or are you married? Like, what kind of sacrifices have you made? And do you look back and say, like, a cautionary tale, or warn someone to say, hey, as you're pursuing these things, also think about those things?
It's a great question. One of the challenges with having regrets, there's nothing about my life that I would change with, where I am now. Like, I am in a relationship that I didn't think was possible. Like, I didn't know love could be this healthy and reciprocated and beautiful and fresh daily. My wife is like the best thing that's ever happened to me. And if you think about changing something in the past, does that mean I'm not right here, right now? That terrifies me. I wouldn't want to change anything. But if I can make changes and not lose where I am and who I am, then yeah, there are things I would definitely do differently. Like, probably the most personal one I could give you is that I put my dad on a pedestal as a young guy, not knowing how terrible he had been to my mom, when it was obvious to everybody. It should have been obvious to me. And I thought love was unconditional. And that's the worst thing you could possibly think, because it gives people the ability to abuse in unspeakable ways. Love has to be conditional, on love. And if I could go back, the person I really wronged in that wasn't so much my mom, but I wronged my dad. Just giving him love instead of asking him to be a better person didn't help him, realize his true potential. So it didn't help anybody. And that would be the number one thing that I would probably go back and be stronger, and by not being so free with my love, but instead, telling people that they should be better and should, like, live up to better standards. It's hard to think that when you're young, though. Like, your wisdom is supposed to flow from the parent to the child, which I think that's only true for, like, the first, very short period of life. But if we look at history, wisdom flows from the next generation to the previous one. It flows from the bottom up. The younger kids they're wiser than I am. They start thinking about animals in a different way while I'm eating meat. They're the ones teaching me about, like, what it is to be trans and what it is to be queer, and how to stop using certain words because they're offensive. And I have to learn from them how to be a better person. And we don't seem to understand that culturally, that wisdom comes from youth, not from old age.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wisdom right there. All right. We're gonna wrap things up here shortly, but if you had top three sci-fi movies that you'd say, like, all right, these are my top three sci-fi movies, what are you picking?
Okay, I'm gonna go like kind of a little askew because I think people have some of this, standard answers to this. I think uh, Edge of
All right, I'll
Tomorrow
give
is
mine, and I want
underrated.
Ben to give his too.
Let's hear
Ooh.
yours first.
Oh, I love that movie.
Okay. 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 So mine first are gonna be Gattaca, Terminator 2, and The Matrix.
Solid.
Man, gosh, that's so funny you said Edge of Tomorrow because I've been talking. I like showed that to my kids just the other day, and I was like, "This is such a good movie." I was actually going to say that one too. Um, anyway, and I don't know if I would say one of my other favorites would be A Quiet Place. I really love. Um, I don't know if you call it a sci-fi movie. I know it's more thriller, but I love the subtlety of it. Also, really love Signs. So I'd say it probably Edge of Tomorrow, Signs, and A Quiet Place probably be some of my favorites.
Well, these are good. Um, yeah, I love science too. I would say, yeah, Edge of Tomorrow. I think my favorite sci-fi movie, maybe of all time, because it encapsulates the genre itself, is Galaxy Quest. I think that's a perfect script, and it's a ridiculous
Yeah, that's
cast.
a good one.
There's nothing
Yes,
I would change about that.
it's beautiful.
Um, and I really
Yes.
love sci-fi horror. So I know they're probably too classic to surprise anybody with, but Predator and Alien, both of those movies, I was just at the right age to like be blown away
Hmm.
by them. Um,
Mm.
but even Starship Troopers, which is to me almost like a satire and comedy, but done so well. Um, and I just love
Yeah.
campy stuff, like all the
Yeah.
really campy stuff I love too.
Yeah. Mars Attacks and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. The horror sci-fi, I'm torn because I hate horror, but I love sci-fi. So like Prometheus is on that list of where it's like, oh man, I love this movie because of all the concepts and then just the like intensity, but then just when it crosses that line of horror, I'm just like, oh gosh, no.
Yeah, I eat that stuff up.
Yeah. Well, hey, tell us a little bit. Yeah, I know. So tell us a little bit about you getting the call and I'm assuming that it's been on the table for a while, right? Like Wool was so popular. I'm sure you've probably had many talks with movie studios to make it into a movie or whatever. Like, what was that? Now it's going to be on Apple Plus, Apple TV Plus. Like, what was that journey for you? Was it a kind of start and stop over the past several years, or what did that look like?
Yeah, it's about a 12-year process. It spent a long time with Ridley Scott and 20th Century Fox as a feature, had a couple scripts, different directors attached. I kept asking, look, if we're not going to make it this year, can I get the rights back? You never get those rights back. But I had a great relationship with these guys, and they were really
Mm,
kind. And after they, couldn't make it over the finish line several times, they let me have the rights back. And I went back out for TV because the world had changed a little
okay.
bit. TV was a little better medium for a big story. And I did a deal with AMC, and they uh, had an amazing creative team, and they weren't sure if they could make it because it was going to be expensive. And Apple was after it so hard, but the first time they approached me, Apple TV didn't even exist yet, and I had to sign an NDA to even talk to them.
Hmm.
Right.
So by the time Apple came to AMC to partner up, it was obvious not only was Apple TV Plus going to be an amazing streaming service, but some of the things they were doing were just so prestigious and well done. So I was like, let's do it. Let's join forces. And so I had like all the best of the creative teams and the passion, deep pockets, and yeah, it sounds. I'm making it a really Reader's Digest version, but it was like mostly years of hearing nothing because I didn't bug people about it. And when I would hear stuff, it was like, yeah, it's moving, it's moving. And then during the pandemic, I just got an email and said, hey, can you get on the phone? Got some news. And I was like, I've never had that email before. And got on the call and they're like, we're going to make this. And that was the green light that started the whole process and started the sets being built and the cast being assembled. And it's just the last couple of years watching them film this and put it together has been one of the most exciting things that's ever happened to me. It's just been a thrill to see how things are made and to watch your imagination become tangible.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so amazing. I love that. That's just like, I'm sure too, like the kid in you just comes alive when you're like seeing all this stuff, like behind the curtain on all these things. You're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
It's crazy. I did a day on set of being an extra, and that was like really wild. Just pretending to be a character in your own, like playing cosplay basically for your own story. And so
yeah.
if you keep a close eye out in episode 10, like I'm towards the end of the episode, I'm like in the crowd, not knowing how to act.
Okay. Yeah, he's like the Stan Lee, in Silo.
Exactly.
Was it hard to give up? Was it hard to give up some control? I'm assuming that the screenplays and stuff are written by other people, and so you had to give up some control as far as how that goes. Like how much involvement did you have when it comes to how they develop the story, what they cut from the story to make it fit, and all those other kind of things?
Yeah, I was, lucky to be an executive producer and to be able to, sit in on the writer's room and help block out the first season and the first episode. And I was more the one trying to suggest going, different from the book, and they would keep pulling me back in. The amazing showrunner we had on this, Graham Yost, was like, "Hey, let's stick to the book," and I'd be like, "But what if it wasn't in a silo?" And I was like doing the crazy stuff.
Twist.
Exactly.
We're calling it silo.
The cool thing about doing TV is instead of cutting things out, we were actually able to add stuff. So we were fleshing out parts of the book that were hinted at, but we could, make it bigger. One of my goals was I wanted people who've read the books to be surprised. I don't want them to know what's going to happen. So we didn't want to be a faithful adaptation on every plot point. We just wanted the characters to be true to themselves. And that was more important than we're not taking the book and, okay, shoot this page and shoot that page and shoot that page. Never works that well. Tell the best story for the medium possible.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think and I love that too, that it's a series, because I think you'll be able to breathe better. One of my favorite books is Ready Player One. And, I just love that story, and I connected so much to the video games and the movies and everything that they referenced and that he referenced in that book. And then I was so excited for the movie, and then they had changed so much, and they couldn't fit all the story the way that it was, so they had to cut tons of things out, and then it's just that classic, well, the book was better, So I am glad, although I could see an amazing, movie off of the story, I think a series is gonna let it breathe better, and who knows, there's just a lot of opportunity for more storytelling and character development. So that's exciting.
Agreed. Yeah. I'd love to see a Ready Player One TV show.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, well, Hugh, thanks so much for coming and sharing with us and just allowing us to hear your journey. And there's just so many things in this conversation that were encouraging, and I think you're going to bring a lot of hope to a lot of people. And motivation too. So thank you so much. And I'm excited for you and for your continued success. And it's really cool to see somebody that you followed for a while. And when I saw that first Apple TV trailer, I texted Ben. I was like, dude, they're making a series. Yep. And then I hit you up on Twitter, and you were gracious enough to come on here, and so we really appreciate it.
Yeah,
my pleasure. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Ben, and safe travels to Costa Rica, man.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for listening to the Friday Habit. If you Want to find out more? Head over to thefridayhabit.com. There you can find show notes for this episode. You can also find links to our websites and ways to get in touch. And at the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit system that will show you how to set aside one full day each week dedicated to working on your business instead of in your business. And until next time, remember, live every day like it's Friday.